Hey everyone, welcome to the Canadian Youth Worker website. My name is Jason, part of the CanadianYouthWorker.com blogging team, and we return once again with an interview of another Canadian youth worker, author, renowned speaker, great communicator, great thinker, Mr. Brett Ullman. Here's Brett.
Hey guys, how are you doing? Thanks for having me.
That's awesome. So, Brett, tell us a little bit about who you are, kind of what you do, just for some of us across the Canadian landscape who maybe aren't familiar with you and just how you're wired for ministry.
For sure. My name is Brett Ullman. I live in Ajax, which is about 45 minutes east of the city of Toronto in Ontario. I attend a church called C4. C4 is just Crothers Creek Community Church, but we call it C4. Been there for about 11 years. My background is actually in education. I'm a high school phys ed chemistry biology teacher who never taught a single day in high school. High school
Awesome.
ever gives up their jobs. So I went down and taught elementary school. My father was a principal, got me an interview. So I taught behavioral students. I did a couple of those interesting classes, and then I did mostly grades 7 and 8, bit of computers and things for probably about 10 years. During that time, I began speaking, and speaking it was never anything I thought would become full-time like it is. It was something that was on the side, like so many of us do. We speak at church, we speak at a retreat, we do the odd men's breakfast or something, but I went from 2 talks my first year to 7 talks to 14, and it just doubled and spiraled until I found myself probably 5 or 6 years into it, speaking 45 dates a year, married with a pregnant wife, with a 1.5-year-old who hadn't slept in the night yet, which was not good. And I'm like, I'd finished teaching, which is pretty intense for those teaching days, and I'd hop on a plane to Halifax or Calgary on the Friday, speak all weekend, fly home Saturday or Sunday night, and then go back to teaching again. And so it was one of those moments of what do you do? And most speakers in Canada they're pastors. They work for organizations. It's a guy like John McCauley from Muskoka Woods Camp, or people from Youth for Christ, or Young Life. But they're people who work for organizations and then go travel and speak. But it was interesting trying to find a paradigm of how to become a full-time speaker in Canada, because it's different than the U.S. So we went full-time thinking I'd be bankrupt in 6 months, both professionally and personally. And I wasn't. My dates went from 45 to around 80, and I've been full-time now for I think 9 years, 8 or 9 years. I forget where we're at. And I love it. And I get a chance to speak on, I always just say issues I think we've forgotten to speak on sometimes. So I do a talk called Media, Faith, Culture, which is a broad, it's a huge talk. It's not a specific talk. It looks at media awareness and everything from a bit of sexuality and video games and music, and not some sensationalism look, but let's have a real honest look at it. Bit of self-injury, mental health. The cornerstone of it, though, is really spiritual disciplines and changing our worldview. How do we get a Christian biblical worldview? It was about 12, 15 years ago, Josh McDowell said, like, your worldview shapes your values and your values shape your actions. And I've used that in that talk for most of my career. And then a talk on culture. How do we engage the world? How do we challenge our kids to take their spiritual gifts and their natural talents and abilities and go and engage the culture? Then I've kind of gone from that and built other talks. I have a brand new talk on self-injury and mental health called The Walking Wounded. I have a talk on men called The Man Talk, a talk on sex called The Sex Talk. You can see I'm naming my talks very simply. It's a lot easier. I have a talk on dating called Dating for Life, which I've actually just posted on YouTube. I posted it, I think it was on Friday or Saturday morning, so it's live. The whole 96-minute talk right now is on YouTube. And I love just having a chance to get in and have some dialogue and conversation and challenge on some of the tougher issues that we deal with in church.
Very cool, Brett. I know that I have had the privilege of hearing you speak in a variety of different environments, whether it's been Canadian Youth Worker gatherings or just one-off events that even my local church here has hosted. You've come in and shared, and I've always appreciated not only the way that you think, but your humility in how you present your topics. And so thanks for helping to shape and form things in my context as well. Going to dive into some of the questions here. First one is this: what do you love about Canada?
It's funny. I've listened to some of the other speakers talk about that, and I'm thinking, like, what do I love about Canada? And I think a lot of people say this, but I would agree, it's the diversity. You go to some places and they're, it's very similar. Canada is so diverse. I love when I can be in Calgary, Edmonton, and see the mountains. I really love being in the mountains, though. Like, I love being in, BC and being in the mountains. all the way through to Newfoundland and the fjords of the Gross Mourne. I love the plains. Like I just love when I'm in. Like I actually like how flat Saskatchewan is. There's something really. There's just I don't know. I like it. There's something cool. And I live in Ontario. I live in the land of 1,000 lakes. And there's something about being on a lake early in the morning. And I even live near Lake Ontario myself, so I get a chance to run and be by the water. I love the sports in Canada, which usually that doesn't really mean a lot, but the Jays are in first, the Raptors went to the playoffs, and I'm a diehard Leafs fan, which is just, I still will be, but it doesn't really go anywhere. So maybe one day we'll even make the playoffs so we can go from there. But I love the diversity too in people. We have every culture in the world in this country. I mean, we always say that with Toronto, but I think we forget how diverse the whole country is as you travel. Doesn't matter what town I'm in, there's diversity. I'm in a small town and you'll see there's an Ethiopian population. There's, a new group from Sudan have come in, and there's a Latino population. I just love seeing how we, express Christian faith in different ways in our country, and it's different, and I love it.
Very cool, very cool. I actually grew up in Saskatchewan. I can testify that it is flat. You can see forever, so it's good. And yeah, if those of you who missed it, I share your affinity there, my friend. So even though I'm in the West, go Leafs, go.
I was at Youthquake this year at Briarcrest, and I came out of the Pilgrim Inn or whatever, the hotel that's in front of it, and I actually was able to see a whole train from end to end. And I remember kind of saying, I've never seen a whole train in my whole life. It was like a 100-car train, and I could see the beginning and the caboose on the end of it. And it made me really laugh because I've never seen that before.
One of the bonuses, if you want to see a full train, I mean, that should be the tourist slogan for Saskatchewan. See everything that you ever could have wanted to see. Full trains, you name it. I think it's got some definite traction that they can use.
It's on a t-shirt.
One thing that you said that kind of picked my brain just leapt on. You're living near Lake Ontario. Would you actually go swimming in that lake?
It's really interesting. Like I live in Ajax. I live, I'm probably half a kilometer from the water, and I don't swim in Lake Ontario. But next week I go to the Sandbanks, which, if you're ever in Ontario, is a wonderful, gorgeous beach. It's almost like Wasaga Beach up in north. You can go out so far in the sand, but it's Lake Ontario too. It's funny how I won't swim near my house, but an hour and a half drive away, I'll go swimming in the lake. So yeah, I do. I swim in Lake Ontario.
That's interesting. I've heard some people who won't touch Lake Ontario just because they're worried that they're going to get scabies or something from the water. So.
It's probably also why I grew up in Ajax. Beside us is a town called Pickering, and they have a nuclear power station there. And growing up, I used to windsurf in a place called Frenchman's Bay, and that's where the water cools the nuke plant and then comes into Frenchman's Bay. So you could windsurf in October, November, and it's still pretty hot. But it's probably why I'm 6'6", and it's probably why I might even glow at nighttime if you look in a dark room. So who knows?
Awesome, cool. Good to know. That's where our next baseball players and basketball players should really go to live for a while. Get some height to them there.
Yes, I agree.
Awesome. Second question, what do you love about your ministry context? You talked a little bit about that. What do you love about it? What do you find difficult?
What do I love? What I love, I think, the most is that I am you can use the word blessed, lucky, whatever word we want to put in there, that I get a chance to speak in all areas of Christian faith. I, on a given week, could be in a Baptist church on a Monday. I could be in a Catholic parish or a Catholic school on Wednesday. And I mean, the other year I did an Egyptian Orthodox church on the weekend, and the next day I was at a private Christian school. It's just, I'm very blessed that I get a chance to get into all these environments. And again, I love seeing the expressions of Christian faith. They're different. I grew up in a Baptist environment. This was kind of the world I grew up in. And then I married a Pentecostal, which I know is not supposed to happen, but it did. But to see how we do Christian faith in different, in an Egyptian Orthodox setting, it's beautiful. And I like that. And I wish I had seen more of that when I was younger. What else do I love? I love that I get a chance to kind of fill an interesting role. Like, I'm not a youth pastor, even though I spend my life with youth pastors. You guys do the grind. The weekly youth pastor stuff is a tough job. It's a lot of nights, a lot of weekends, a lot of work. But I get to fill an interesting role. Like, my gift, like, I'm a teacher. Like, that's really who I am. So, if you're preaching every single week, you have X amount of time during a week to prepare a talk, a sermon, a message, and then give it that week. I'm a little different. I take about 2 years for a talk.
Mm.
And so there's a book by Bill Hybels called Holy Discontent. And my talks have always been built on what is the holy discontent that God's given me. And, so like my last talk called The Walking Wounded was built out of, some of my own journey, having a breakdown a few years ago, which I'll talk about more later if we got some time. But I spend a few years. I read 100 books. I talk to a few thousand people. I, spend hours on Google. I go through commentaries. I talk to people, and then I can build a large. My talks are not small. They're 200 slide presentations, and I can speak for an hour and a half to 2 hours. But you can't cover topics like sex or self-injury or even dating in some, 3 C's on dating. What I like is I get a chance to really walk through a conversation in an intellectual way that we really need to walk through. And so I love that I get a chance to do that. It really allows me to work through a topic. And because I get to speak a topic more and more, I spend my entire life now updating and creating, I'm not creating, isn't it? Like, I take the talks I do and I keep building them. I try to figure out, how do I connect better? How do I help people connect their ancient faith with their modern world better? And I do that through books and through, my own devotions, whatever I can do to help people with that. It kind of gives me a chance to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Difficulty. What's interesting is that at first I thought, I don't want to say that. I don't want to. I think sometimes we spend so much time talking about what's wrong with things, but I think it's good and important to do that as well. Probably the thing I dislike the most in Canada is this Canadian pacifistic attitude of stuff, and especially about faith. Intentional, strategic Christianity. There's a book I read, I forget who wrote it, maybe just D.A. Carson, and he talks about thoughtless watching. Like, we thoughtlessly watch TV, thoughtless listening of music. I go farther, thoughtless gaming, thoughtless dating. But we sometimes have this thoughtless Christianity. We just do whatever and see how it works. And Christianity is a strategic, intentional pursuit. Mm-hmm. And even for us as leaders and parents and for the students, there has to be a strategic way that we do it, not just try this, read this, and see how it goes. There should be something we can kind of work towards in that.
Yeah, I know. I hear you, and I appreciate that. I would echo that very much so. There's a friend of mine, Caesar Kalinowski. He uses this phrase, it's not about addition, it's about intention. If we can be more intentional on the way that we're already currently living our lives, how much more of an impact, how much more awareness of God at work in the lives of people around us would there be?
For sure.
Yeah.
The second thing I wrote down is something that I'm seeing a lot more. It's the lack of mercy and grace towards other Christians who do life or ministry different. This is something that I've seen a lot. There isn't a week that goes by when someone doesn't write me and say, you didn't use the right translation of Scripture. Or like one lady wrote me the other week and said, I'm really angry with you. You swore during your talk. And I'm like, I don't remember swearing at all. And she said, yeah, you said the word sucks. And I'm like, and this was a page letter of why my ministry is invalid because of my language. But there's bigger ones than that, because that's kind of the normal nitty gritty. I was speaking at an event called Missions Fest last May, and my last 2 years have been interesting. I had a full breakdown. I graduated from Wheaton grad school a few years ago. I did the Aero program, then Wheaton, and I was traveling crazy, 250 dates a year. I was writing books every year, family, church involvement, and the day I graduated, I began a 5-month journey. Basically, I call it my pre-breakdown. And 5 months after, I collapsed in a parking lot, and I spent almost a year at home. I canceled 150 speaking dates. The irony is that the things I speak on, anxiety and depression, panic attacks, became my life. And I still struggle. I haven't slept through the night once since March 1st, 2012. I'm up every sleep cycle, every night. But it's interesting, as a leader and as a Christian going through this journey, the lack of grace that I've seen. I was at this event called Missions Fest, and a man stands up and calls me satanic and a false prophet because I was talking about counseling. It's kind of like we've polarized on issues, and as opposed to learning from each other and trying to find how we help people in healing or different things, we don't. We critique and criticize, and I've just seen way too much of that stuff. And it's really, there's got to be, in the things we agree on unity and the things we disagree on liberty. Now, there's a limit with that, and I agree with that, but somebody loves expository preaching and someone loves topical. It's kind of like, these aren't debates. I like both of them. Having a Bible that is on my iPad or having a physical Bible, it's not a debate. I like both of them. We don't have to polarize on all these issues.
Yeah.
Um, what else? Oh, one thing I do see these days too, and I spoke at Queensway Cathedral in Toronto. Actually, it's called Church of the Queensway now. And I was talking to their young adults pastor as we left, and I just said, you know what's interesting is the disconnect between, we have children's ministry, junior, senior high, young adults, and that's kind of a continuum. But there's this fracture between that and then the big church, the main church, where you're in for the rest of your life. We have this highly contextualized children's, junior, senior high, young adults. I mean, every week is based around food. I mean, last night, young adults, they have dinner, we're watching the soccer game. There's something, we're talking about life and real issues. And then we head into the main church. And what's interesting is how many people say, and I do a lot of preaching on Sunday mornings where I do my talk on media or even my self-injury, and people say, wow, we talked about something, that's really I'm dealing with today in church. I'm like, how have we disconnected that? I read a study that says the top 10 things people want to hear about in church and then the top 10 things we speak about in church. And not one thing on one list was on the other list. Mm-hmm. And things like sex, and the big conversation today is, how do we talk about and give grace and mercy to people struggling with, dealing with homosexuality, using whatever language we want to with that. Like, what do we do to the LGBT community? How do we give grace and mercy? But what do we do with that? But we just don't speak on it. And the people who do speak are usually very polarized on those issues. And even topics like sex and mental health. How do we help someone when someone walks up to you as a youth leader and says, I'm struggling with depression. What do I do? Mm-hmm. So I think we need to look at, contextualization, even in the big church too. We need to look at not a fracture in the middle where you don't leave, you're 25, you suddenly walk into a building and you don't understand that context. There should be something that's bridging that gap in the years before that.
Absolutely, and I think you're pointing to a lot of the, I'll call it angst, that many youth workers, young adult workers, children's ministry workers are feeling across our country. And one of the many reasons why CanadianYouthWorker.com does exist, to be a collaborative experience where different ideas can be shared and celebrated for how they exist and what they are. And it comes back to what you said about what you love about Canada. It's looking at our diversity, not just in geography, but in theology, in practice, celebrating diversity, knowing that each one of us bears the image of God. Doesn't matter who we are or what we're working through in our season, our thorn in the flesh, or whatever you want to call it. We are all image bearers of God, and that is something that is far more powerful than anything that divides us. So love that. Love it and appreciate it, and thanks for being transparent with us, Brett, about your own personal journey. Want to move on to this next question. Who are some thinkers or writers that Canadian youth workers could begin to start digesting?
This was a hard one for me. I hated reading when I was younger, and I love reading now. There's something that's really just changed in me. So I wrote down a list here so I don't forget them. But I mean, there's people today that I'm podcasting on a weekly basis. And so I'm really enjoying Mark Clark presently. I don't know if you know Mark. Mark's at the Village Church out in BC, in Vancouver. I forget where inside that. But I grew up with Mark, which was quite interesting. So it's amazing to see him and his ministry growing. I sit under a guy named John Thompson at my church who has an amazing anointing and an amazing vision, and I really enjoy him. I enjoy Bruxy Cavey at the Meeting House. I really love Carrie Newhoff at a church called Connexus in Toronto. I podcast still Erwin McManus down at a church called Mosaic in LA. Really enjoy him. David Overholt at Church of the Rock in Hamilton. I've known David for many years. And I really like Rick Warren. Some people, again, we're so polarized in who we like and who we don't. I love how Rick is very open about things. After his son took his life this year, he did a 7-part sermon series on hurt and pain. He did a whole conference this year on mental health in the church, and I just really appreciate he's willing to talk about the issues. The other part of what you asked me about was thinkers, and I tried. It's hard to separate thinkers and writers, but there's some thinkers who I really have enjoyed, watching. And I mean, they're not mentors of mine that they know, but I love how Wayne Cordero says, that there are mentors who they don't know that they're mentors, but they are. Because you watch them, you follow them, you see what they do. Guys like John McCauley. John came and did one of my things at the Arrow program, and John's been a friend of mine for years, but such an amazing thinker at Muskoka Woods. Everybody at Ravi Zacharias, RZIM. I just love some of those, the thinking and concepts and challenge. Arrow Leadership, I've really, really enjoyed. They have some great, even if you've never been to Arrow, they got some great resources and mentoring things they'll send out every week. Kerry Oberbrunner, I don't know if many people know him, but Kerry's an amazing thinker in the U.S., as well as a guy named Tim Saunders. Tim years ago looked like McFly from Back to the Future. That's when I first saw him. I think he's changed a bit. Crystal Earle, who used to, she works for a lot of the justice conversations today. She just wrote a book, and I just really enjoy her. Dr. Mary Lynn, she runs a thing called Life Centers near me, and she writes on a lot of like psychology and counseling, and there's got to be a way we can have those conversations and faith and put them all together, and she does a really good job at that. I am enjoying Jackson Katz. Jackson Katz, some people I guess have called him a male feminist, and I actually think that title's fine. I mean, I think as men we should stand up for women and be against misogyny and those things. He's not a Christian guy, but his videos and his commentary on the state of men today is second to none. One of my profs at Wheaton for one of my classes was Alan Hirsch, and books like The Forgotten Ways are just some of the best books I've ever read. Michael Frost wrote Exiles. I love the idea of, missional church and how we do it. Mm-hmm. And I get a lot of these leaders I yearly go to the Leadership Summit, and I know that there's sites in Calgary and across the country. And every year, I love going to that just because I get to hear good thinkers. And when you're hearing good thinkers, whether they're the people you like or you don't, you get to grow and you get to move forward. Yeah. And on parenting, Karen Gordon, her website's just Dr. Karen. I just really enjoy her practical sense of how we parent. And for me, some people say, well, how do you keep track of all these people? On my iPad, I use an app called Pulse. Have you ever heard of Pulse before?
Yep.
I think it was bought by LinkedIn this year, but I'm able to follow about 100 blogs. And what I love is it just takes the blog, it puts it in little squares, and I can quickly scan 10 blogs in a page looking for, like, everyone who blogs, well, not everyone, many people blog, and I might go, I don't care about 5 of the 10 topics, but 5 of them I might really enjoy. And I can take an hour in a week and scan over 20, 30, 40, 50 blogs, and it's a great, great app, and I think it's free. But those are just some of the people that I'm kind of engaging with, and I'm always trying to find other great thinkers as well. So, I mean, even with a video like this, I'd love if people shared some of their thinkers as well. I mean, whether it's in comments or online on Facebook or something.
Absolutely. That's one of the many goals, like I said, about this is being this collaborative environment and going, hey, have you heard this from so-and-so or seen this? Or, hey, I really disagree with this individual. What does anybody else think? So thanks for helping to shape some of that, Brett, with sharing your top thinkers and readers and writers that you are paying attention to right now. Last question before we're going to go into something brand new. But last question, what would you say to Canadian youth workers to encourage them?
I don't know if this is encouraging or just a statement, but the biggest conversation I have today is mental health and self-injury. And I would say to youth leaders, if you're not a counselor, stop counseling. I think so many youth leaders and pastors today have no counseling background, but they're in a church and someone says, I'm struggling with cutting anorexia, bulimia, depression, anxiety, and they believe they should start counseling. I would say, you don't need to do that. I mean, you basically become a middle person. The talk I do now, I'm basically trying to create a process for people, which is there's only a few roads to healing. I mean, people can find it in the medical world, and that's diet and exercise and sleep and those things. They find it in counseling and they find it in faith. You basically can walk people down those journeys, but if you're not a counselor, you don't do the counseling. If you're not a family doctor, you don't know what's going on with their body. But as a pastor, we can walk some of that faith conversation with them. But I think it creates a lot of stress for pastors today. I was talking to a 22-year-old youth pastor the other week. He's like, I'm counseling 6 people. I'm like, but you're not a counselor. Then find a local counselor in your community, in your church, and have them counsel. And you can journey along with them. If you need to go for the first session, you can. I would say too, on another conversation, delegate. It's not easy, but delegate. And I mean, John Maxwell always said, if someone can do it 80% of what you can do, then let them do it. And that's hard to do, and I fully understand that. But to me, if I was at a church last year and the youth pastor had just resigned and moved to another church, amicable, good leave, everything else, and I came in thinking, how's it going to be? It was perfect. He had leadership teams already set, and I came in and they were missing that person, right, that head of all that. but their leadership teams all just stepped up and everything was just running as smoothly as ever. And I'm like, that's awesome.
Hmm.
I'm so excited when I see that someone built teams and distributed responsibility, and that if we move, because pastors move, right?
Hmm.
And if someone else can come in, there's already something going, and I love that.
Hmm.
I would say this. We as leaders must look at our lives, and my encouragement would be that I encourage you to do these things. We must start taking a Sabbath.
Hmm.
After having a breakdown, my life's changed, and I don't travel the amount that I used to. I mean, my master's is done, and I'm glad it's done. I enjoyed it, but like I have more time with family. I have more time for faith. I have more time, for my wife and children and church and stuff. But we need a Sabbath. I mean, I spoke yesterday morning and yesterday night. I mean, and people go, well, that's your Sabbath. I'm like, almost all of us who watch this video don't have a Sabbath on Sunday.
Hmm.
We work, but we need to get more rest. We need good sleep. We need to exercise. And I know we don't like it, but we need to do it. We need to eat better.
Hmm.
We work with youth. I mean, if I have one more pizza and a Coke as I travel into a youth group, I mean, that's good, but we need to eat better than that. What I see as I'm traveling since I've been sharing my journey, what I get every week of my life now is, you got 5 minutes? And when people say that, it's someone, it'd be like you and me chatting, and you go, you got 5 minutes? And you go, this is my journey of burnout and breakdown. And it's staggering to me the numbers of us in ministry, not to say there's not people in education and nursing and business. That's happening too. But in the world we have in ministry, the amount of work we have to do and the burnout and breakdown is just staggering. And I'd say we got to look at taking care of ourselves. It's just we must just kind of partition that off and work on those things and encourage each other to do that.
Hmm. Absolutely, I would agree that self-care piece is something. I don't know if when I was being trained as a pastor, we didn't talk about that much. We talked about how you care for everybody else and how you're always putting your needs of others ahead of your own, yada, yada, yada. This idea of hospitality, your home should always be open, and those are all great things.
Mm.
But if you're leading from an empty tank, as you well know, if you're leading from an empty tank, you have nothing to give people. And uh, taking that Sabbath to restore your own soul, to uh, just pay attention to what God is saying to you is the best thing that you can do sometimes as a leader. So, huge advice there. Thanks so much, man. I really appreciate those words of encouragement for us as youth workers.
I would say too, anyone who listens to this who wants to chat about their journeys, I'm
Mm,
open. I mean,
awesome.
I've really been quite open with my journey of struggle with anxiety, depression, and panic attacks, which I never had. My breakdown began at 40. So I'm open to talking to anybody if you want to chat about that, for sure.
Perfect. And how would they get a hold of you? Like, I'm on Twitter. I don't know if you're on Twitter. That's backwards there, probably, but at
If you
JFrizz,
Sorry, if
where?
you just my website, brettallman.com, if you go to the top right, all my social media is up top. And I
Perfect.
have I have 4 books. My latest book is called Reset. It's really the last 2 years of my health journey. It's a 99-cent book that we only did digitally.
Hmm.
And it's basically burnout, breakdown, and suffering that leads to hope, healing, redemption, and rescue. And 18 other pastors and people posted their journeys as well in this book. So it's kind of
Cool.
a cheap look at how we walk a journey like that.
Brilliant. I think youth pastors love anything digital and cheap, so that's
Sure.
awesome. Hey, I want to wrap up our conversation here with something that we're going to launch. It's called the Canadian Youth Worker Quiz. I've got 5 rapid fire questions. Just going to shoot them at you and answer with the first thing that comes to your mind. You game for this?
I am. All right.
Okay. Question number 1. What is your favorite animal found on Canadian money?
I don't know what animals are on Canadian money. I have no idea.
Awesome. We're well known for that. We don't celebrate much Canadian animals,
I
but
was going to
maybe
say
you'll
like
go.
beaver, but I'm like, I look for money on my desk. There's no money on my.
All right, all right, okay. Second quick question: what is your favorite name of a Canadian school that you've spoken to or at?
Well, these are supposed to be easy questions. This one pops up. I've done 1,500 talks. I'm trying to think of a name of a school I like. Um, do you know what and as Canadians, we name our schools great Canadian thinkers. So
Yep.
I mean, I love when there are people who've been in space and people who've done great stuff in justice. And wow, I'm going to say I don't know again.
Okay,
This
no
really
worries.
well. That's two in a row.
That's okay. Hey, no worries. One of our favorite ones here in Calgary is something called SJAM, just because they can shorten it to SJAM. It's Sir John A. Macdonald, but
Mm.
they reference it as SJAM, and it's just kind of funny. Everybody thinks they can dunk if they go to the school, but it's not true. Third, really quick question. Name 3 to 5 youth workers in your ministry network, even first names, some guys that you're connecting with.
Well, I connect with guys. Adam Clark would
Yep,
be a good friend of mine. He works in Toronto People's Church. Um, Even guys I follow a lot. I haven't had a chance to hang out with Grover in a couple of years, but Grover, and you know Grover well at your
yep.
church, just a good thinker and someone who I love people who post lots of stuff online.
Hmm.
A third one that I connect with a lot. See, it's interesting for me because on a given week, I might be in 3 or 4 different churches with 3 or 4 different pastors and leaders.
Yep.
Um, I enjoy also probably AJ at Briarcrest. He does a lot of, he just posts a lot of interesting things as well. And so those are just a couple of guys. I mean, the truth is there's hundreds of guys and girls. I shouldn't just say guys. There's lots of guys and girls that I've met and I engage with, but those are just a couple names that have come into my mind right now.
That's perfect. I think one of the cool things is, even though you're not maybe centered down on one specific congregation, you're out there meeting people and you're connecting with others. That's
Mm.
brilliant. Networking is huge for longevity in youth ministry and just in ministry in general. Okay, 2 more questions really quickly. Have you ever met a member of the Canadian Parliament? If so, do you remember who?
Canadian Parliament. Well, yeah, Chris Alexander lives about 10 doors from me. So,
Okay.
yes, I met him. And the reason I meet him is because our addresses, I get his mail about once every 3 or 4 months. I live at 68 and
Awesome.
he lives at something which looks like 68. So, but yeah, he lives 10 doors down from me. I think he's the PC member of parliament today in Ottawa.
Wow, that's a big deal. That's pretty cool. Ajax representing.
I know.
Okay, last one. Who is your favorite Canadian actor?
Favorite Canadian actor?
That's a tough one.
It's funny. I love movies and I love TV, but putting the Canadian who's the favorite one in there. Do you know what? I don't. I'd have to think about that. I don't know
Okay.
again. That's a
That's
tough one.
okay. That's
I'm
okay. And
in
maybe
movies too, which is interesting.
maybe you can just post it in a comment. Maybe as this goes live, this week sometime, as you have some time to think about it. I thought you were going to go with Mike Myers just because of our connection here.
I love Mike Myers, but I mean, where's Mike Myers been for the last 10 years? I can't. I'm 43. I can't keep going back to Wayne's World and stuff from many, many years ago. I mean, there's got to be something a little newer than that.
Yeah. Yeah, I just watched something on Jimmy Fallon with him the other night, and he's actually getting into the director world. So maybe that's his new shtick now.
Good.
Cool. Well, Brett, thanks so much. Really appreciate you. Again, all the effort and energy you're not only pouring into stuff like this, sharing your story with Canadian youth workers, but just serving the local church and the body of Christ here in Canada by sharing just out of your expertise as a teacher. I really appreciate that. Thanks so much for doing this. You're awesome, man.
Thanks, bud. We'll chat
Cool.
soon.
Thanks, guys, for tuning in. Share this if you liked it. Great. If you had some more questions for Brett or anything else on your mind, we'd love to hear from you.